Welcome to Resisting Beta, the men's health podcast. And now, your host, Andrew Bonce. Welcome to the Resisting Beta podcast. My name is Andrew Bonce. Here are some questions that we're going to get into today with our guest, Lucas. What could our friendships look like if we want to become the best version of ourselves? What emotional skills do men need to have a healthy state of mind? And I was checking out their website, the EVRYMAN website, and there's some words that I haven't heard a lot in my life. The first one is, what is somatic awareness? It's like, okay. And another one I think I have a better guess at is, what's emotional authenticity? I just like that word. I haven't seen it put before that way. So I'm excited to dive in to answer those questions with Lucas. So Lucas was working as an executive leader at a Fortune 100 tech company. And he's climbing the corporate ladder, reaping the benefits of a solid paycheck and a stable career. But no matter how much he had, he felt lost, disconnected, and empty. And he discovered there's a lot of men just like him, and they just felt the same way, felt that calling, and he decided to walk away from that career and start again. And he started the EVRYMAN. He's a CEO and co-founder, and they're on a mission to help men and able to connect with themselves and others through the powers of community, self-awareness, and emotional development. So, Lucas Krump, thank you so much for being here, man.
Hey, Andrew, man, it's great to be here as well.
So, tell me a little bit more about that journey from bigwig to founder, man. Like, what was that pivot like in your life?
You know, I think when we're younger as men, we're very driven by ego, right? We're very driven by a lot of the accolades and things that we think that we need to acquire to create an identity. And we spend a lot of time pursuing those things. And after we achieve them, I know for myself, but I've heard from other men that the level of fulfillment that we thought was on the other end of that journey isn't necessarily there. And, one of my favorite authors, David Brooks, talks about like the second mountain, right? The first part of our career, the first part of our life is generally chasing, identity and title and all the things that we need to really satisfy the ego part of us. And after we're able to satisfy that and we sort of learn the lesson of like, okay, does that provide me the level of fulfillment, purpose, and meaning that I was expecting? Or do I need to go and climb a second mountain? And so for me, EVRYMAN is definitely the second mountain. At the same time, very, very grateful for, the journey that I did have in the corporate world, in the business world. Taught me a hell of a lot about leadership, about how to interact with others, how to build consensus, and all the various skills that you need to be successful in that world. But I know for me, what I'm particularly driven by is impact and purpose. And so, EVRYMAN in so many ways is a very selfish endeavor, because ultimately I benefit the most as an individual.
Sure.
But at the same time, it benefits a lot of other men.
Do you feel stuck in the skin of a man you no longer recognize? Fed up with the results that you keep on getting in your life? You're not alone, brother. You're not broken. You're just missing one key piece. You're missing a brother to lock arms with, to stand side by side with you and celebrate in the good times, but kick your ass when you're slipping. So I want to give you a choice. Proceed alone and keep getting the same results you've always gotten, or join the Resisting Beta men's group so we can move forward from here together. Check out our website. Can't wait to see you there. So, being selfish, was that just kind of allowing you to kind of solve some internal problems or some mental blocks and stuff just through the project? I mean,
Well, when I
unpack
say
that with me.
selfishness, basically, I was 36 years old, I believe. Was working for a tech company that got acquired by you know a big internet company. I had a decent exit there. It sort of, for the first time in my life, made me feel like I sort of had accomplished something.
Okay.
Um, and despite the financial benefits, as well as just the feeling of success when I didn't start the company, but I was part of. I helped it. I helped it get to where it was. Um, I thought that those sort of accomplishments and the money would bring me a certain level of happiness, and when
Right.
it didn't, I got very frustrated.
Hmm.
And so I went looking, because I was very introspective around. Wow, I've spent a lot of my life thinking that this was going to bring me the level of happiness and fulfillment that I was looking for, and then when I didn't get it, I was I was kind of hell bent on figuring out why that was. And so in
Hmm.
my exploration of that, I came across my co-founder, Owen Marcus, um, who he's 69 years old, spent the better part of 40 years working with men, written books, trained thousands of men in his modality, and um, I was very blown away by what I found in him. And at the same time, as I was looking for, uh, as I was looking for that exploration to answer some of those deeper questions around why I wasn't feeling fulfilled and happy in my life, I, my therapist at the time had told me that I needed to find, I needed to spend more time with a different group of guys,
Hmm.
um, than I was currently investing into. And I went around looking for a men's group. And quite frankly, nothing that I found really resonated with me.
Right.
Um, I remember kind of saying, where are just the everyday dudes? Like, where are the everyday guys just like me? Like, I don't, everything that I was kind of out there was very like spiritual or religious or, some cultural appropriation, just like, and again, nothing negative about any of the various avenues that are out there. I'm very, I, I'm very pro anything that somebody finds that aligns with who they are and helps them on
Right.
their journey. I'm good with that. But for me on my journey, I didn't find the everyday guys, and
Hmm.
so um, I was like, okay, well, if you didn't find it, then you gotta, the entrepreneur in me sort of set out on a path of building it.
Hey man, I feel you, brother. It's hard to find. I mean, in college and high school, you kind of have you're forced to make friendships because you're just next to a bunch of other men at the same level of life and that kind of stuff. And then I don't know when it happens or whatnot, but like you just kind of stop being intentional about building community in your life. You just kind of have a bunch of fake friends and acquaintances that you talk about surface level stuff, but nothing that's super meaningful. And that's what you know.
Well, as men, we're not taught how to do that. We're not
Right.
we're not given those skills. A lot of our friends are come from, school, geography,
Hmm.
uh, sports, other type of, shared activities, whether it be a fraternity or something like. And I'm not saying any of those things are bad.
Right.
Those are very important to our development. But once we sort of graduate from college, um, and are sort of, you know, catapulted into the world, a lot of those opportunities don't exist for us anymore. And what I see end up happening is a lot of guys hang on to friendships that don't necessarily serve them at
Right.
the at where they're at in their current life. That's not
Hmm.
to say that friend shouldn't exist and that you should sort of end that friendship, but what I find more than anything is there are guys out there that are looking for like-minded men.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it's harder to try to bring guys that aren't aligned with you up to that level versus just going out and finding guys that want the same thing. And we're not given, we're not really given the tools. We're not taught how to do that as men.
Yeah, and I think that like I'm huge in personal development, been in the game for 20 years, and I was that guy had full books of where people have full books of those CDs, those leatherback things. Mine was full with like personal development CDs, and I was like the odd duck, weird friend that just couldn't get enough of it. But if you apply that everyday ritual of listening to that for 20 years, you just start to become kind of just a different person than your friend group. And
Mm-hmm.
you almost have to like not necessarily dumb yourself down, but like hide that part of your life. And that's kind of, I actually had to do that in my marriage. It's one of the reasons why the marriage no longer served me was I had grown so much, and she's a great woman, and she kind of grew more in her career, but not more holistically like I had, and we just kind of became two different people. Like she still wanted to be the partier and that kind of stuff that we were in our 20s, and I was like, well, I get hungover for 3 freaking days, like when I have 4 beers. So like,
Yeah, I
I
hear you,
can't,
brother.
I can't do that stuff. So like, but that happens with like, your family and your friends group. If you don't have men that are growing with you, it's hard to have somebody around you to call you on your stuff. And if they're not at an elevated position, like if you don't have that, I guess it's more of a respect thing. If you don't have
Mm-hmm.
a respect for that, they've also put in the work too, that you can connect on that level. It's just not the same, So I think there's so many of us that lone wolf it. Then I mean, I'm guilty of that. Where it's like, okay, well, I guess I'll just lone wolf it and spend a lot of introvert time and just keep plugging along.
Yeah, and lone wolfing it works until it doesn't work.
Right.
Because lone wolfing it is actually contrary to our biology.
Right.
Humans, we are hardwired to connect. That we need connection. And so when we go down a path of sort of, solo pursuit, we may be able to go faster, but ultimately at some point we sort of look up and think, wow, this isn't quite as enjoyable as I thought it was going to be,
Mm-hmm.
because we need connection.
Right. Yeah. I remember in college where I joined a fraternity, and looking back, the honest part of me is I probably just did it just to pay for friends, because
Mm-hmm.
that brotherhood mentality of a fraternity that they talk about, that they market kind of, is super attractive. But then I was in it, and then looking back on it, it's like, it's not, at least for me, it wasn't what they sold it to be. It was just kind of a bunch of parties that we could all hang out at the same time and throw better parties because we had more pooled money. But that's how it was, my experience in Oshkosh, Wisconsin, But it's funny, like now you look at it for business masterminds and that kind of stuff, to where like it feels like the only way you can find men of similar caliber is business events, where you're dropping money here and there and that kind of stuff. So, but then in the general locale of where you live, at least for where I live, I have a few select men where we can talk business, but the closeness isn't necessary. That brotherhood there that is not necessarily super strong. So how have you figured that out in your life of building more of that, building brothers in your life and building that community.
Well, I mean, that's a big part of what Everyman is. Everyman is a community of like-minded men that are all committed to their personal growth, happiness and well-being. Um, and what I've, I mean, for me, it's an incredible honor to be able to uh, facilitate, or enable the community and the organization that is Everyman to exist. Um, and when I say selfish, like it is selfish because like I benefit greatly from it. I have so many of my close friends and guys that are, you know, uh, men that I would do anything for, and they'd probably do anything for me, have come through, the organization. Um, I think building it came from a place of, to back to your beginning point, emotional authenticity, like
Mm,
just showing up and being able to be very real and very authentic in what I was feeling and what I wanted,
right.
to be able to say, I'm at a point in my life where I'm lonely, and being lonely makes me sad.
Hmm.
And what I want is a group of guys that got my back.
For sure.
And so when you put that out into the world, it's true, it's authentic, and
Mm,
something kind of magical happens when you are authentic in who you are and what you want,
hmm.
because other guys will gravitate towards that.
I love that, man. Yeah, I went through when I was married. I She was like my best friend and everything, right? Like I didn't have a lot of other friends. I mean, besides just kind of surface related, play sports, watch sports, talk about sports, that kind of stuff. And that's a dangerous thing to do. If your woman, your partner, is your confidant and your psychologist and all of that stuff, and you talk about all of your emotion, your frustrations, your feelings, and with her, she can't feel that, if you don't
Hmm.
have that, a group of men that you can actually talk authentically about, and be
Yeah.
yourself around that, then
Well, there's a lot of emotional labor that comes with that puts a lot of unnecessary strain on relationships. And,
right.
I see a lot of guys, one of the things that's a common thing is guys don't necessarily feel safe around other guys,
Mm,
right? And I think a lot of that has to do with our evolutionary biology, right? Like 1,000 years ago, you know, it was life or death, right?
right.
If if I had food, there was a possibility that you were going to take it, because that was survival, right?
Right.
And in our world today, it's very individualistic, right?
Mm,
Everything is a zero sum game, right? There's only one CEO, there's only one captain or whatever, and so we are we as men we operate in this very individualistic world, um, and so we often find safety in our partners.
mm,
But what happens from with that safety is then we over index, right? We over
right.
index on sort of using our partner to be, as you said, our best friend, our romantic partner, our life partner, our psychologist, our confident, all of these things. And just the emotional labor that comes with that is, it puts a lot of drag on a relationship.
Hmm.
And if guys wake up and realize that, I really feel like that would, I mean, in my personal opinion, it's the difference between, successful relationships and not. Um, but in order for guys to do that, it takes courage. It takes risk, right? It
Right.
says, okay, hey, I'm going to have to step into an uncomfortable space like a group of men, I'm gonna have to join EVRYMAN, or I'm gonna have to go to EVRYMAN retreat, or anything else that you find, and I'm gonna have to open up and get real with a group of guys and be vulnerable, which is probably something I've never done before.
Right. Especially like growing up, when if you're vulnerable or you look silly, you're teased, like that middle school bullshit and high school bullshit where most of your guy friends just made fun of you the whole time,
Yeah.
Which there's some of that, just razzing each other and giving each other a little bit of shit. But like knowing where the line is, or if a guy is being truly vulnerable around you, to not make fun of him,
Yeah.
And I think that there's definitely some trauma associated with bad relationships with guys, middle school, high school type crap. And it's a lot easier just to not risk that, It's like, okay, well, if I show my true self to this man and talk about my struggles, my issues, my inadequacies, he's going to make fun of me, and he's going to think I'm less of a man, and that's real stuff, man. It's hard to get past that.
Yeah. I always find that interesting, though. It's like that phrase, less of a man, because in my mind, like, I don't know what more of a man is, right? Like,
True.
who like, and this is, I think this is really, really important, in that, you can read the headlines and you can talk to people and they're all like, oh, there's a crisis of masculinity, like what, all of this stuff. And like, quite frankly, I don't know a lot of guys that wake up in the morning and be like, look in the mirror and say like, oh, what does it mean to be a man? Right. Like, guys aren't doing that. Guys, what I see in, for my own self is, hey, how do I get to be all the parts of me in this construct of being a man? Meaning that I like to, there's a spiritual side of me. There's a soft side of me. Like, I like to, do yoga, and I like to hunt or go fishing, or,
Right.
like, how do I get to be all of those things within this construct of a man? Right.
Yeah.
And I think our culture, our society hasn't given us the space to be all of those things. It's given us the ability to be sort of one definition of what a man is. And then we're left with this phrase of like, oh, if I don't meet that standard, then I'm less than that. Right. And then I go to this place of judgment.
Yeah. Judgment, scarcity, loneliness, all that stuff is that path towards authenticity and discovering who you are as an adult male is such a fascinating journey, because at some point in time you stop becoming what you like, following all your parents' values and following the path that they took, and you're kind of like, okay, well, I'm in my late 20s, early 30s. Is like, who am I? Like, what are my values? What do I stand for? And for me, it was like, what do I want? And that was something that you were talking about, towards like, okay, figuring out what do I want? Like, what do I unapologetically want? And, and going after it.
Totally, going after it. But I think at the same time, like, I don't necessarily see that path of discovery as linear, right? What I wanted when I'm 30 is different than what I want when I'm 40, right?
True.
And who I am at 43 is different than who I was at 35, right? And so, can we, I love, the concept of Shojin, which is, essentially from Japanese Zen Buddhism, beginner's mind, right?
Okay.
Can I walk with a beginner's mind? Can I walk, can I can I operate from a place of like, what don't I know? Right? Rather than like, oh, what do I know? What don't I know? What don't I know about myself? What don't I know about the world? What don't I know about others? What don't I know about my partner? Because that sort of uh, that path of curiosity and discovery, it enables us to continually be growing, right? To continually be evolving and sort of finding out who we are, and allowing ourselves to evolve as individuals.
I love that. I think, and it takes a lot of intentionality, right? And that's where I think the divide happens, to where there are some people that I meet where they haven't read a book since college. It's like, that's so foreign to me. I don't even know what that life looks like, or where that goes. So what kind of tools, or systems do you use in your life to kind of facilitate this growth? 'Cause I love kind of the holistic feel that you've talked about, from yoga to hunting to, I didn't catch the, was it Shozin?
Shozin.
Sojin. Okay.
Yeah. For me personally, it's a combination of things. It's not any one thing. I'm not a, like, every single day I meditate at 7 a.m., and I sit quietly and I go, on, 10-mile hikes with a heavy backpack and all this stuff, like, which is cool. I do that stuff. But not every day. I think my approach to life really is around discovery, and finding out like what works for me. One of the things that I like to do is lift heavy weights, right? I find a lot of benefit in my just in the process of that challenge, right? Of doing something and committing myself to that practice. But that's unique to me, right? And another area that's a big focus for me is being in a weekly men's group, right? Being in a weekly EVRYMAN group where I'm able to create some real intentional time to practice what I call kind of emotional fitness, right? Or relational fitness. Like, okay, let's get into a room. Let's get super real with a group of guys, and let's expand our capacity to feel what's real for ourselves, but also feel what's real for the other guys in the room, and be willing to receive feedback and inquiry into where we're at. I think that creating that intentional space and having that be a part of my life is, it's probably one of the most important investments of my time. One of the things I truly believe is that our existence as a human is made up of our physical body, our mental body, and our emotional body. And the thing that we invest the least into as men is our emotional body. Right? Like, and emotions are our superpower.
Right.
But yet it's the one area of our life that we don't invest into, that we don't, put consistent effort into sort of working out and expanding. And when we don't invest in that, it limits our ability to have the full experience of our existence as humans.
Yeah, because it's like, I think the more I can make references to stuff that makes sense to me, like, playing sports, I played football and basketball and college volleyball and that kind of stuff. having that practice mindset makes total sense because you're like trained in it as a kid. And it's always what you did. You practiced to get good. And then you get out of college, you stop doing organized sports, and that practice mindset isn't as honed, right? So I love the fact that you brought up you're kind of practicing in the emotional mind or the emotional body, right? Spending time there intentionally on a repetitive basis and getting better at it and getting more comfortable. And I think that it all comes down to kind of discipline, to where it's like, okay, having the discipline to do those sort of intentional things to flex or work on those muscle groups to help improve them, because you haven't practiced much as men. We weren't taught to practice those things. So
Yeah,
having a place to do that.
I sort of break it down into a couple of key areas. Like one, emotional literacy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Can we as men express how we're feeling in a given moment? Because if we can't, if we don't have emotional literacy, then people can't connect to us. And spoiler alert, like, I'm fine, I'm okay, I'm good. None of those are emotions. That tells another person nothing about where you're at in this present moment, right? I'm talking emotional, literacy around, okay, can I actually describe what my experience is in this moment on an emotional level? If I can do that, then somebody else can connect with me, because they will ultimately be able to feel what I'm feeling. Then, can I learn emotional dexterity? Can I learn that, as a human, I'm going to be happy and I'm going to be sad. I'm going to experience fear and I'm going to experience courage, right? I'm going to experience joy and I'm going to experience shame. None of those states are static, right?
Mm.
They move throughout. And so do I have a dexterity that allows me to move between those emotions and experience all of it? Because you meet, there's some guys that's like, well, I'm sad. If you don't have an ability to have an emotional dexterity, like, you may get stuck in just being sad,
Right.
And then that, dexterity leads to resiliency, right? Because when you're moving within this, within your emotions, you're ultimately expanding your capacity to experience them all, which leads to resiliency, right? Life is challenging, right? There are going to be periods of extreme difficulty, and extreme joy and happiness. Our ability to be resilient and know that is, that's just part of the human experience, is what allows us to, keep on the path of self-discovery and not sort of get stuck in any one area. And I think, again, guys are really underdeveloped in emotional fluency, dexterity, and resiliency. And we tend to focus on resiliency being this other thing of like, oh, I'm mentally tough, or I'm really strong. It was like, okay, great. Like, but you're lonely as fuck inside, because you can't express how you're feeling. And so people can't connect with you. And if people
Right.
can't connect with you, I don't care how many friends you have. A lot of guys have a lot of friends, but none of those friends are deep, meaningful friendships that actually nourish them on a deeper, more human level, like the type of connection that sustains us and enables us to thrive as humans.
I just love the last 5 minutes you just invested into these men. And if I were you, man, I'd pause and go back 5 minutes and listen to what Lucas just said again, because there was so many little light bulbs going off in my head that it'd be worth it. So some of a few things that there's a lot of. There's a couple books that I've read, like the Extreme Ownership and the David Goggins book, and you see these men that are just so disciplined and so kind of like just look like hard men, right? But then you hear what they've gone through as a human being. You're like, I don't want to go through that. But that's kind of like they're up on a pedestal right now, especially in the personal development world. But what you just said is very much almost like multiple pillared building your own emotion. That's like building your own emotional callus, right? And that's what David Goggins talks a lot about. It's like just become more resilient, just so you can get through harder shit, but you just talked much more of a broader dynamic of emotions to where it's like, okay, well, you almost have to build an elasticity to your emotional bubble, right?
Yes.
To where most men, if you hit a threshold of emotional stuff that you can't get past, they numb it. Mm-hmm. And they throw alcohol at it, they throw drugs at it, they throw porn at it, they throw positive stuff like I'm just going to work harder at it, I'm going to go to the office longer, all of these things, but versus not just like being able to sit in that emotion and discovery of that, or talking through it of like, hey, I'm feeling this, but I can't articulate it.
Right. And that comes back to your point around, what is somatic awareness, right?
Yeah.
Somatic awareness is, first of all, somatic is a Latin word. I'll let the listeners look up the definition, but somatic awareness is, am I aware of what I'm actually feeling in my body, both the physical sensations as well as the emotional sensations. One of the exercises that we do at EVRYMAN, literally every time that we do anything, whether it's groups, retreats, whatever, is we do a check-in. And that check-in starts with a body scan. Can I scan my body and actually identify things that I'm feeling in my physical body? So, in this moment, I feel tension in my neck. I feel, the pee in my stomach pressing up against my bladder, or the pee in my bladder. My toes are cold, and my mouth is dry. Emotionally, I feel joy in my heart talking to you. I feel fear and anger. That's where I'm at right now. And we practice that because we are so disconnected from ourselves to the point where we're not really present. We're not really feeling anything. And if we're not really feeling anything and experiencing it, what I would call embodied, then what we're taking in isn't necessarily being imprinted onto us on a deeper level. It's like there's this thing that we do in our culture where it's like everything is prescriptive. Like I can go and read David Goggins books all day long. He's total badass, right? But if I don't experience and feel what he's talking about for my own self, if I'm just trying to sort of like take his directions and apply them to my life, that ultimately you're not embodying that. You're just basically following somebody else's playbook. And then eventually, if it's not embodied, then it doesn't sustain. It doesn't stick. Right? And so like we need to use that information from David and all the other incredible authors that are out there to inform what we want to explore in ourselves, but we need to get emotionally honest with ourselves around what we actually feel excited about, like where we actually feel resistance, like, because that is what's going to be a deeper, more sustainable, generative change within you versus just trying to sort of like copy somebody's playbook.
I love that, man. I haven't heard someone put it that eloquently, so I honor you for the level of work that you've invested in yourself and people you've been around to help share this information. I mean, it's super helpful. So when you talk with the men that we're talking to, if you're listening to this, how can every man in like the events that you put on, because this is next level stuff, like, and it almost feels so far, like it's almost unattainable for maybe the average guy out there. So how do these events at like the foundation event and EVRYMAN, how do they help close that gap and help them take baby steps towards
Love it.
towards what you're talking about? Because this sounds pretty amazing.
Love it. Love it. Yeah. Well, spoiler alert, like I'm an everyday guy. And it's called EVRYMAN for a reason. I actually grew up in Kansas. Very, very proud of what growing up in Kansas taught me, the humility and just sort of awareness that gave me. Personally, what I've always really felt challenged by is this idea that, personal development and growth and sort of wellness like has to exist on the coast, right? Or it has to exist for, a certain subset of guys that look a certain way or act a certain way. Like, quite frankly, I think that's total bullshit. Like, who doesn't want to feel a little bit better?
Right.
Or a lot of better? Like every single guy out there, I don't care if you're in, Nebraska or Georgia or New York or, Australia, like we all want to feel a little bit better. Like feeling is part of being human. So why wouldn't we want to experience that? And, what we've worked really, really hard on and what I'm most proud of is that the community of men that participate in EVRYMAN are just everyday guys. Like, and one of our core values within EVRYMAN is we have a no guru, no hero policy. Like, we are all our own guru. We are all our own hero. We all have unique experiences and wisdom that we can bring and share with others, and we all stand shoulder to shoulder equally. I personally participate in every single thing that we do as a member.
Cool.
It's really, really important for us. And so, how can guys get involved? We have a 4-week online program, EVRYMAN Fundamentals. That, like, if you never did that, if you only did that program and never did anything with EVRYMAN ever again, it would probably be one of the single best investments of your time and resources in terms of developing your emotional awareness and capacity, and the benefits of that will be seen in your relationship with yourself, the relationship with your partner, your spouse, your family members, your community. And I've just seen it. Like, thousands of guys have been through these programs, but the place to get started is fundamentals.
All about fundamentals. Vince Lombardi always started off like, this is a football, and he's one of the best coaches ever, right? So you got to start the fundamentals.
Yeah, and that's quite frankly, that's why we call it fundamentals. Like, we just, we reckon, guys got to accept the fact that I think personal growth is an interesting thing, in that we sometimes treat it as a destination versus a journey, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what happens is we get sort of good at some things, and then we over-index and focus on those things. But then the things that we're not good at, we just like don't invest any time into. And so when I talk to a guy about like, oh, great, like, how do you feel? I was like, well, why do I need to feel? Like, what do you mean? Like, what? I'm like, well, your partner, like, you want to have better sex? Like, start to feel what's in your body, feel how you feel, and then be able to communicate that to your partner and see what happens. Like, you want to be a better leader, communicate authentically where you're at in this moment in your life and see if people, walk towards you or away from you. I'm pretty sure it's
Right.
towards you. Like, this is an area that we as guys have to be willing to say, okay, I need to invest in that, because most of us haven't.
So good, Lucas. This is awesome. I'll add the information to Foundations and to Everyman into the show notes, men. So I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on where you can follow Everyman. And we'll just kind of, because just check out the show notes because they'll be there. Lucas, there's a couple questions I like to end every episode with.
Yeah.
First one is kind of a simple question, but a little deeper than a lot of people get to it. Where first one is, what does it mean to be a man to you?
Great question. And to me, being a man means just being able to be all the parts of me. Like, being a man means that I can be soft, and I can be hard.
Mm-hmm.
I can be tender, and I can be rigid, right? I can exist within all the realms of myself, and I can do that from a place of authenticity. Um, you know, I think another piece of being a man for me is being of service,
Okay.
to others. And yeah, I also just believe that, like, every man needs to define what it means to be a man for themselves. There's no one definition that
Mm-hmm.
that is better than another.
I haven't heard two people say the same thing yet. So, second part is I'm all about quick wins and helping people create like the baby steps, because sometimes you can see someone that's so far along on their journey. Like I can tell you have in the amount of thousands of hours you've invested into yourself, they can feel so far behind that they're not going to figure out how to take the first step. So what is one thing they can do over the next 7 days, like their homework, to help them get a quick win in their life, from, what we've talked about today?
Reflect on a place in your life where you're not being honest with yourself. Write it down, and then, if needed, go and have a conversation with somebody about that.
I love that. Well, Lucas, I've gotten a ton of value out of this, and I feel like we're like kindred spirits that just kind of cross paths right now. So I'm super excited about where you're at as a man, and I'm proud of you, man, for the level of investment you've put into yourself and the ripple effect that you're having in the world, and lifting men up, because we have a shared impact on men. And I feel honored to have met you and to have you on the podcast. So thank you so much for being here.
Man, likewise, brother. It takes a lot of courage, and commitment to put yourself out there and, live your values so publicly. And, I feel, I agree. I feel like we're cut from the same cloth. So thank you for the work that you're doing, in the world.
Awesome. Thanks, men. Make it a fantastic day.